Have you ever felt like your prayers just hit the ceiling and bounce right back? Like maybe God's got his hands over his ears, not listening? Well, what if I told you there's a kind of prayer that God simply can't ignore? It's not about saying the right words or praying for hours on end. No, it's about something much deeper, something that comes from the very core of who you are as one of God's chosen ones. This special prayer isn't some magic spell or secret formula. It's a way of talking to God that comes from a place of real connection and trust. Imagine having a direct line to the creator of the universe, where every word you say is heard and considered. That's what we're talking about here. A prayer so powerful it can move mountains in your life. Now, you might be wondering, why should I care about this? My prayers seem fine. Well, let me tell you why this matters so much. If you keep praying the same old way, without really connecting with God, you might start to feel like He's not listening. You might even give up on prayer altogether. And let me tell you, that's a lonely road to walk. But if you learn this special way of praying, everything can change. Suddenly, you'll start to see God working in your life in ways you never imagined. Problems that seemed impossible to solve start working themselves out. Doors that were firmly shut begin to crack open. It's like you've been given a master key to unlock God's blessings in your life. Think about it this way. It's like the difference between sending a letter to occupant and writing a personal note to your best friend. Which one do you think is going to get a better response? That's the kind of difference we're talking about here with prayer. So, what makes this prayer so special? It all comes down to your heart and your faith. This isn't about saying the right words or following a strict set of rules. It's about coming to God as His chosen child, fully believing that He not only hears you but wants to answer you. Let me break it down for you with a simple example. Imagine you're a parent and your child comes to you asking for help with their homework. They're not just asking because they have to, but because they truly believe you can and want to help them. That's the kind of trust and belief we're talking about here with God. This prayer is about approaching God with complete honesty and openness. It's about laying everything out before Him. Your hopes, your fears, your dreams, and even your doubts. It's saying, God, I might not understand everything, but I trust you completely. When you pray like this, it's like you're tuning into God's frequency. You're not just talking at Him. You're opening yourself up to hear from Him too. And that's when the real power of prayer starts to show up in your life. Now, let's dig a little deeper into what makes this prayer so powerful. The first key is having unshakable faith. This doesn't mean you never have doubts or questions. It means that even when things look impossible, you choose to believe that God can and will come through for you. Think about the story of David and Goliath. David wasn't a big, strong warrior. He was just a young shepherd boy. But he had something that all the trained soldiers didn't: an unshakable faith in God. When he stepped up to face Goliath, he didn't see a giant that was impossible to beat. He saw an enemy that was no match for his God. That's the kind of faith we're talking about here. It's looking at your problems, whether it's illness, financial troubles, or relationship issues, and saying, my God is bigger than this. It's praying with the confidence that God not only can answer your prayer, but that He wants to. This kind of faith isn't just about believing hard enough. It's about knowing God's character and trusting in His goodness. It's remembering all the times He's come through for you in the past and believing He'll do it again. When you pray with this kind of faith, it's like you're already seeing the answer. You're thanking God for His solution even before it happens. And let me tell you, that kind of faith-filled prayer gets God's attention every single time. Now, the second key to this irresistible prayer is persistence. This doesn't mean pestering God or thinking that if you just say the same thing over and over, He'll give in. No, it's about showing God that you're serious about what you're asking for. Jesus told a story about a widow who kept going to a judge asking for justice. The judge wasn't a good man, but because the widow kept coming back, he eventually gave her what she asked for. Jesus said this was to show us how much more our loving Father in heaven wants to answer our prayers when we keep coming to Him. Being persistent in prayer is like watering a seed. You don't just water it once and expect it to grow into a big tree overnight. You keep watering it, day after day, believing that growth is happening even when you can't see it yet. When you pray persistently, you're showing God that this isn't just a passing whim. You're demonstrating that you really believe in what you're praying for. It's like saying, God, I know you hear me, and I'm going to keep trusting you until I see the answer. This kind of persistence also changes you. As you keep praying, you might start to see things from God's perspective. Maybe what you're asking for isn't exactly what you need, but as you keep praying, God helps you understand what's really best for you. The third key to this powerful prayer is having a humble heart. Now, this doesn't mean thinking you're worthless or that you don't deserve God's help. It means recognizing that God is God and you're not. It's about coming to Him with respect and openness, ready to listen as much as you talk. Think about how you'd approach a wise person you really look up to. You wouldn't barge in making demands, would you? You'd come with respect, ready to listen and learn. That's how we should approach God in prayer. A humble heart says, God, I don't have all the answers. I need your wisdom. I trust that your way is better than mine. It's being willing to admit when you're wrong and to change direction if that's what God is telling you to do. This kind of humility opens the door for God to work in your life in amazing ways. When you're humble, you're teachable. You're ready to receive not just the answer to your prayer, but the growth and change that God wants to bring about in your life through that answer. Praying with a humble heart also means being willing to forgive others. Jesus said that if we come to pray while holding a grudge against someone, we should go and make peace with them first. That's because a heart full of resentment can't fully connect with God's love and grace. When you bring together unshakable faith, persistent prayer, and a humble heart, something amazing happens. Your prayers start to align with God's will. It's like you're tuning into God's frequency, and suddenly, you're not just asking for things, you're partnering with God in His plans for your life and the world around you. This alignment is powerful because it means you're not just throwing wishes up to heaven. You're actively participating in bringing heaven's reality into your earthly situation. You start to see things from God's perspective, and your prayers become more than just a wish list. They become a powerful force for change. Imagine you're rowing a boat. If you're rowing in one direction and the current is going another, you're going to struggle. But when you align your direction with the current, suddenly you're moving with incredible speed and ease. That's what it's like when your prayers align with God's will. This doesn't mean you'll always get exactly what you ask for. Sometimes, God's answer might be different from what you expected. But when you're aligned with Him, you trust that His answer is always for your good, even if you don't understand it right away. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds great, but how do I actually do this? Don't worry, I've got some practical steps for you to start praying in this powerful way right now. First, start by spending time getting to know God. Read His Word, the Bible. The more you know about God's character and His promises, the stronger your faith will become. It's like building a relationship with a friend. The more time you spend together, the better you understand each other. Next, make prayer a regular part of your day. It doesn't have to be long or complicated. Start with just a few minutes in the morning or before you go to bed. Talk to God like you're talking to a close friend. Tell Him about your day, your worries, your joys. When you pray, be specific about what you're asking for. Instead of just saying, God, bless me, try saying, God, I need your help with this particular situation. Being specific helps you recognize when God answers your prayer. Also, don't just talk. Make sure to listen too. After you pray, take some quiet time to see if God brings any thoughts or ideas to your mind. He might give you guidance through a Bible verse, a song, or even through the advice of a trusted friend. Keep a prayer journal. Write down what you're praying for and the date. Then, when God answers, write that down too. This will help you see how God is working in your life over time, which will boost your faith even more. Remember, prayer isn't just about asking for things. Make sure to spend time thanking God for what He's already done in your life. Gratitude opens our eyes to see God's blessings and increases our faith for future answers to prayer. Now, let's be real. Sometimes prayer can be hard. There will be times when you don't feel like praying, or when it seems like your prayers aren't being answered. That's normal, and it happens to everyone. The key is not to give up. If you're struggling to pray, start by being honest with God about it. Tell him you're finding it hard. Ask him to help you pray. Remember, even the disciples asked Jesus to teach them how to pray better. When it feels like your prayers aren't being answered, remind yourself of God's faithfulness in the past. Look back at your prayer journal and see how He's answered prayers before. This can give you the strength to keep believing. Sometimes, the answer to our prayers is wait. This can be really hard, but it's often in these waiting periods that God does His deepest work in our hearts. Use this time to draw closer to God, to learn more about His character and His promises. If you're dealing with doubt, that's okay too. Bring your doubts to God in prayer. He's big enough to handle our questions and our struggles. Often, it's through wrestling with our doubts that our faith grows stronger. As you start praying in this powerful way, you'll begin to see changes not just in your circumstances, but in yourself too. Prayer has a way of transforming us from the inside out. You might find that you start to see the world differently. Problems that used to overwhelm you now become opportunities to see God work. You'll start to notice God's hand in the small details of your life, not just the big events. Your relationships might improve as you bring them to God in prayer. As you pray for others, you'll find your heart softening towards them, even if they've hurt you. You might find yourself becoming more patient, more kind, more like Jesus. You'll also start to understand God's heart better. As you spend time in prayer, you'll begin to care about the things God cares about. You might feel led to help others, to stand up for justice, or to share God's love with those around you. Remember, prayer isn't just about getting things from God. It's about developing a deep, personal relationship with Him. As you pray, you're spending time with the Creator of the universe, the one who knows you better than you know yourself and loves you more than you can imagine. When you start praying in this powerful way, it doesn't just affect you. It can impact the world around you too. Your prayers can be like a stone thrown into a pond, creating ripples that spread far beyond what you can see. As you pray for your family, you might see relationships healed and strengthened. As you pray for your workplace, you might see a positive change in the atmosphere there. As you pray for your community, you might see needs being met in unexpected ways. Don't underestimate the power of your prayers. When you align yourself with God's will and pray with faith, humility, and persistence, you're partnering with the Creator of the universe to bring about change. That's an incredible privilege and responsibility. Remember, some of the biggest changes in history started with prayer. Great revivals, social reforms, and personal transformations all began because someone dared to pray and believe that God would answer. So, don't hold back. Bring your biggest dreams, your deepest hurts, and your most pressing needs to God in prayer. Believe that He hears you, that He cares, and that He will answer in His perfect timing and way. As you make this kind of prayer a regular part of your life, you'll find yourself growing closer to God, becoming more like Jesus, and seeing His power at work in and through you in ways you never imagined possible. This is the prayer that God can't ignore, not because of any special words or techniques, but because it comes from a heart fully surrendered to Him, trusting in His goodness and aligned with His will. It's a prayer that says, God, I'm yours. Use me. Work through me. Let your will be done in my life and in the world around me. So, are you ready to start praying like this? Are you ready to see God move mountains in your life? Remember, you are one of God's chosen ones. He's waiting to hear from you, to work in you and through you. Don't wait. Start praying now, and watch in awe as God begins to work in ways you never thought possible. Let's dive deeper into the first key of this powerful prayer, unshakable faith. This isn't about never having doubts. It's about trusting God even when things look impossible. Think of faith as a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Unshakable faith starts with knowing who God is. He's not some distant figure in the sky. He's your loving Father who cares about every detail of your life. When you pray with this understanding, it changes everything. You're not begging a stranger for help. You're talking to your dad who has all the power in the universe. Remember the story of Abraham? God promised him a son when he was way too old to be a dad. It seemed impossible, but Abraham chose to believe God anyway. That's unshakable faith. It's looking at a mountain in your life and saying, God, I know you can move this. This kind of faith isn't based on feelings. Some days you might feel super close to God. Other days, not so much. But unshakable faith says, God, I trust you no matter how I feel. It's a choice you make, not an emotion you wait for. When you pray with unshakable faith, you're not trying to convince God to help you. You're reminding yourself of who He is and what He can do. It's saying, God, I know this looks impossible to me, but nothing is impossible for you. This faith also means trusting God's timing. Sometimes, He answers prayers right away. Other times, He asks us to wait. Unshakable faith says, God, I trust that your timing is perfect, even when I don't understand it. Praying with this kind of faith can be hard at first. Start small. Look for little answers to prayer in your everyday life. Thank God for them. As you see God working in small things, your faith will grow for bigger things. Remember, faith isn't about being perfect. It's about trusting a perfect God. Even when you mess up, even when you doubt, you can always come back to trusting Him. That's what makes your faith unshakable. Now, let's talk about the second key, persistent prayer. This isn't about repeating the same words over and over. It's about not giving up, even when it seems like nothing's happening. Jesus told a story about a woman who kept asking a judge for justice. The judge wasn't a good guy, but he finally gave her what she wanted because she wouldn't stop asking. Jesus said this shows how much more our loving God wants to answer us when we keep praying. Persistent prayer is like knocking on a door and not stopping until it opens. It's saying, God, I know you hear me, and I'm going to keep asking until I see your answer. This doesn't mean God is ignoring you. Sometimes, He's working behind the scenes in ways we can't see yet. Think about a farmer planting seeds. He doesn't plant them one day and expect a full-grown crop the next morning. He keeps watering and tending the field, trusting that growth is happening underground. That's what persistent prayer is like. You keep praying, trusting that God is working, even when you can't see it yet. This kind of prayer also changes you. As you keep praying about something, you might start to see it differently. Maybe what you're asking for isn't exactly what you need. As you persist in prayer, God can help you understand what's really best. Persistent prayer doesn't mean you're trying to wear God down or change His mind. It's about aligning your heart with His. It's saying, God, this is so important to me that I'm going to keep bringing it to you. Help me understand your will in this situation. Sometimes, we give up on prayer too soon. We pray a few times, and if we don't see results, we stop. But what if the answer was just around the corner? Persistent prayer keeps going, keeps believing, keeps trusting. This doesn't mean you have to spend hours on your knees every day. Persistent prayer can be quick check-ins with God throughout your day. God, I'm still trusting you for this. Help me to see what you're doing. Remember, even Jesus prayed persistently. In the garden before He was arrested, He prayed the same prayer 3 times. If Jesus saw the value in persistent prayer, how much more should we? The third key to this powerful prayer is having a humble heart. Now, this doesn't mean thinking you're worthless. It means recognizing that God is God and you're not. It's about coming to Him with respect and openness. A humble heart says, God, I don't have all the answers. I need your wisdom. It's being willing to admit when you're wrong and to change direction if that's what God is telling you to do. Think about how you'd talk to someone you really respect. You wouldn't barge in making demands, would you? You'd speak with respect, ready to listen. That's how we should approach God in prayer. Praying with a humble heart means being open to God's answer, even if it's not what you expected. It's saying, God, I trust that your way is better than mine, even if I don't understand it right now. This kind of humility opens the door for God to work in amazing ways. When you're humble, you're teachable. You're ready to receive not just the answer to your prayer, but the growth and change that God wants to bring about in your life. A humble heart also means being willing to forgive others. Jesus said that if we come to pray while holding a grudge, we should go and make peace first. That's because a heart full of resentment can't fully connect with God's love and grace. Praying with humility doesn't mean you can't be bold in your requests. You can ask for big things, but you do it knowing that God sees the whole picture and knows what's best. You're saying, God, this is what I think I need, but I trust you to give me what I really need. Remember, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. When you come to Him with a humble heart, you're positioning yourself to receive His grace, His guidance, and His power in your life. Humility in prayer also means being willing to wait for God's timing. It's saying, God, I want this now, but I trust your timing. Help me to wait patiently and to see what you're teaching me in this season of waiting. Praying with a humble heart can be challenging in our me-first culture, but it's so worth it. As you humble yourself before God, you'll find yourself growing in ways you never expected. You'll become more like Jesus, who was the perfect example of humility. Now that we've talked about the 3 keys to this powerful prayer, you might be wondering, how do I actually start praying like this? Don't worry, I've got some practical steps for you to begin right away. First, set aside a specific time each day for prayer. It doesn't have to be long. Even 10 minutes can make a big difference. Find a quiet spot where you won't be interrupted. This could be in your bedroom, your car, or even a corner of your local park. Start by simply talking to God. You don't need fancy words or long speeches. Just be honest. Tell Him what's on your heart. Share your worries, your joys, your hopes, and your fears. Remember, He already knows everything about you, so you don't need to pretend or hide anything. As you pray, try to focus on who God is. Remind yourself of His power, His love, and His faithfulness. You could start by saying something like, God, I know you're bigger than any problem I'm facing. I trust in your love for me. Be specific in your prayers. Instead of just saying, God, bless my family, try praying for specific needs. God, please help my sister find a job she loves. Give my parents wisdom as they make decisions about their retirement. Don't forget to listen. After you've talked to God, take some time to be quiet. See if any thoughts or ideas come to your mind. Sometimes God speaks to us through our thoughts, through a Bible verse that comes to mind, or even through a song. Keep a prayer journal. Write down what you're praying for and the date. Then, when God answers, write that down too. This will help you see how God is working in your life over time, which will boost your faith even more. Remember, prayer isn't just about asking for things. Make sure to spend time thanking God for what He's already done in your life. Gratitude opens our eyes to see God's blessings and increases our faith for future answers to prayer. Lastly, don't get discouraged if you don't see immediate results. Remember, persistent prayer is key. Keep praying, keep believing, and keep trusting in God's perfect timing. Let me share with you a personal story about how this kind of prayer changed my life. A few years ago, I was going through a really tough time. I had lost my job, my relationships were strained, and I felt like everything was falling apart. At first, my prayers were just desperate cries for help. God, fix this. Make it all go away. But as I kept praying, something started to change. Not my circumstances, at least not right away, but my heart. I started to focus on who God is, not just on what I wanted Him to do. I began to trust that even though things looked bad, He was still in control. I kept praying, day after day, even when it felt like nothing was happening. Slowly, things started to change. Not in the way I expected, but in ways that were even better. I didn't get my old job back, but I found a new career that I love even more. My relationships didn't magically become perfect, but I learned how to communicate better and forgive more easily. Looking back, I can see how God was working all along. He wasn't just fixing my problems, He was changing me. Through persistent, humble, faith-filled prayer, I grew stronger. I learned to trust God more. And in the end, the answers to my prayers were far better than what I had originally asked for. This experience taught me the power of praying with unshakable faith, persistence, and a humble heart. It showed me that God really does hear our prayers, and that He's always working for our good, even when we can't see it. Now, I want to encourage you to start praying like this. I know it might feel awkward at first, especially if you're not used to praying. But remember, God isn't looking for perfect words. He's looking for a sincere heart. Start small if you need to. Maybe set aside just 5 minutes a day to talk to God. Tell him about your day. Share your worries and your joys. Thank him for the good things in your life. As you pray, remember the 3 keys we talked about. Have faith that God hears you and wants to answer. Be persistent. Keep praying even when you don't see immediate results. And come to God with a humble heart, ready to listen and learn. Don't be afraid to pray for big things. God is able to do more than we can even imagine, but also be open to how he might answer. Sometimes, God's answers look different from what we expect, but they're always for our good. If you're going through a tough time right now, know that God sees you. He hears your prayers. Keep talking to him. Keep trusting him. He hasn't forgotten you. Remember, prayer isn't just about getting things from God. It's about building a relationship with him. As you pray, you'll find yourself growing closer to God. You'll start to understand his heart better. You'll become more like Jesus. So, I challenge you to try this kind of prayer for the next 30 days. Set aside time each day to talk to God. Write down what you're praying for, and watch how God starts to work in your life. You are one of God's chosen ones. He loves you more than you can imagine. He wants to hear from you. He wants to work in your life. So don't wait. Start praying now, and get ready to see God move in amazing ways. As we wrap up, let's remember the incredible power of prayer that we've explored together. We've learned that the prayer God can't ignore isn't about saying the right words or following a strict formula. It's about coming to God with unshakable faith, persistent dedication, and a humble heart. We've seen how this kind of prayer can transform not just our circumstances, but our very selves. It aligns our hearts with God's will, opens our eyes to his work in our lives, and deepens our relationship with him. Remember, you are chosen by God. He hears every word you say, every cry of your heart. Your prayers matter to him. They have the power to move mountains, to bring about change, and to unleash God's blessings in your life and in the world around you. So I encourage you, don't let this be just another thing you've heard about. Put it into practice. Start today. Set aside time to pray. Bring your biggest dreams and deepest needs to God. Trust him, keep asking, and humble yourself before him. As you do, be prepared for God to work in ways you never imagined. He might not always answer in the way you expect, but he will always answer in the way that's best for you. Remember, prayer is not just a religious duty. It's a lifeline, a direct connection to the creator of the universe who loves you more than you can fathom. It's a privilege, an adventure, and a journey of growth. So go ahead, start praying. God is listening, and he can't wait to show you just how much he loves you and how powerfully he can work in your life. Your journey of transformative prayer starts now. Are you ready? God is waiting to hear from you.